What up, guys and goddesses? How y'all doing out there in them social media streets? It's been a minute since I came to y'all with some petals of wisdom. I usually do them in the morning, but it's been a while, and I wanted to reconnect with you all on a philosophical tip, just to reflect on some things that I've just been growing through, as I like to say. But before we get in too deep, allow me to introduce myself for those of you who do not know who I am. I am the one, the only Zaya Samai Kefesa Kim Haruki Net, and I help overgivers who struggle to speak their truth and be themselves, craft, and implement the ultimate blueprint to total life transformation through alchemy, psychology, and herbalism. And today I want to talk to y'all about the power of delusion, the law of resistance, and the balance we need in between. Okay? So come on into the lotus room, drop your lotus, drop your blue heart, say hey, show love from YouTube, from Facebook, wherever you are tuning in from. Come on up in the space so we can have this conversation. Because I'm about to be a lot more transparent than I've been in a long time. I really pride myself on being vulnerable anyway. And I was debating about whether I was actually going to be this open and this honest and this transparent about what I am grappling with at the moment. But I think this message is going to help somebody. I think it's going to help somebody. If you have ever experienced a situation where you wanted a certain kind of family dynamic and you always longed for that, but eventually you had to come to terms with the fact that your family is probably never going to be who you want them to be, this is alive for you. So let's get into it. So, like I said, I'm talking about delusion, I'm talking about the law of resistance, and I'm talking about the need for balance. But I want to tie everything together with a quote that keeps resounding in my head when I think about all of this. And it's by Zora Neale Hurston. So the quote states, ships at a distance have every man's wish on board. For some, they come in with the tide. For others, they sail forever on the horizon, never out of sight, never landing until the watcher turns his eyes away in resignation. His dreams mocked to death by time. That is the life of men. Now, women forget all those things they don't want to remember and remember everything they don't want to forget. The dream is the truth. Then they act and do things accordingly. So I want to use this quote to kind of give a little precursor of the law of resistance, right? And this concept of delusion. So my thesis for today is that delusion can be an amazing manifestation tool, but it can also be your greatest downfall. Why is that? Well, delusion can be very helpful in piquing our imaginations. As Black people, we find ourselves in unhappy situations, undesirable situations, right? It's kind of been our history. Now, I must say, we are not all a monolith. And some people are going to say that that's not their story. They have a story of happiness, they have a story of love and support and all those things. And that is wonderful. You are our ancestors' wildest dreams, right? But for a lot of us, we are not living the life that we want to live. And that really ain't, honestly, that's not even just relegated to being Black at this point. It's relegated to being poor. It's relegated to not being rich, honestly. We're in an era where the working middle class is quickly vanishing. And if we're not careful, we're going to find ourselves on the wrong side of poverty. But I digress. I want to talk about delusion, how delusion can be helpful in manifesting the life that you want, and how the law of resistance plays a role in that. Okay. So the first half of the quote said that men, let me repeat it because I don't want to mess it up. It says, ships at a distance have every man's wish on board. For some, they come in with the tide. So what does that mean? That means that for some men, eventually the dreams that they have in their heart, or like the desires of their heart, they're eventually going to come in with the tide of the waves of life's experiences, right? But then it goes on to say, for others, they sail forever on the horizon, never out of sight, never landing until the watcher turns his eyes away in resignation, which means that for some men, a lot of men, their greatest dreams elude them all of their lives. And the very moment at which they give up, their dream beseeches them. And the end result is just, time laughing at them. Right? They personify time in this phrase. And time begins to laugh at these men who have spent their whole life pursuing a specific kind of dream and finally giving up. Right? The law of resistance plays a role in it because we know what the law of resistance says. It says that what you resist persists. And so when you find yourself in a chasing mode, constantly pursuing something, then you are resisting the reality that it's not in front of you, that it's not here, right? And when you're chasing something, you are acting in such a way in which basically chasing perpetuates the idea that you don't believe you deserve it, because you're running after it instead of being still and allowing faith to hold you until that thing comes to you. So that's the law of resistance. And time will laugh at you because it is a social construct that is designed to make you feel as if the things that you desire most will never beseech you. Now, the other half of the quote says that women forget all the things they don't want to remember and remember all the things they don't want to forget. The dream is the truth. Then they act and do things accordingly. So in the second part of the quote, she's subliminally speaking to the law of attraction. Because how does it begin? How does the law of attraction begin? It begins with an idea or an inkling of what you want life to be about. What you want life to feel like, look like, sound like, taste like, smell like, right? And then you forget about all of the negative things that would interfere with that being the case. Y'all, it's a Lynette up in here and I can't get rid of it. I messed around and left some doggone fruit in the kitchen, and Lord. Anyways, we're going to keep going. So That's the life of women. They use the law of attraction, where men may be more prone to the law of resistance. Well, what role does delusion play in all of this? Delusion is a benefit. It could be a benefit or a curse, because if you use it in conjunction with the law of attraction to pique your imagination to manifest the life that you want, then you are avoiding a lack mindset that says you cannot have whatever it is that you desire. Whereas with the law of resistance in conjunction with delusion, it can be very different. You kind of working against one another. So let me break it down to you and let me add some context to the situation. When I think about my life as a daughter to my mother and my father, I think about a lot of various things. But in this particular season, as I grapple with the loss of my mother in the physical realm at the beginning of breast cancer month, and I find myself embodying her energy more and more than I ever have in my life, I also must face the reality that the more I embody my mother, the more my father will resent me. Houseway. Well, let's get into it. See, I had to come to the realization this past weekend that I represent the truth that my father never wants to address. I represent the reality that he had a certain dream and a certain perception and a certain idea of what life was going to be like. And he spent his entire life pursuing that lifestyle. And in the same instance, resisting all of the friction and the resistance, fighting against the resistance that was getting in the way. So what does that mean? What did that look like? Well, my father is a conservative Christian. He comes from the Bible Belt, the Delta of Mississippi. He comes from a line of big, strong, dark-skinned Black men, right? And so he had his share of trauma, racial trauma, growing up as a big Black man in the Delta of Mississippi. And as he ventured out into the world, the stereotypes and the hurt and the harm that comes with being a big Black man in this racist world left his scars on him. Combine that with the childhood trauma of a broken family, and you get the desire to want to create a happy, holistic Christian family. Christian values that are steeped in patriarchy and steeped in the subjugation of Blackness, so much so to the point that he has also grappled with self-love and self-hate and colorism. You know how they say you color struck? That was my daddy. And he came into contact with this beautiful, beautiful woman with high yellow skin. She liked to wear blonde hair and she liked to dye hair, and you know, she was that girl. Always have been, always will be. And when you look in my face, you see her. So imagine the yellow version of her when you looking at me, sitting here having this conversation with you. She was supposed to be the missing piece of his puzzle to manifest this whole dream. Ship set a distance with his dream on board, right? She was that ship coming in. Well, things did not go the way he or her planned. She married for certain reasons. He married for certain reasons. But when they got into the marriage, it was toxic. I have my own personal memories of that toxicity. I'm not going to get into all the details of that. But at the end of the day, he had an idea of what family was that was founded upon good, conservative, Christian, color-stricken values. This idea of purity, this idea of suppressing your desires, all of those taboo topics that we talk about or we avoid when talking about organized religion and how it conditions us. My mother was the epitome and the embodiment and the antithesis to all of that. Yet he chose her to marry. Ships at a distance, have every man's dream on board. Right? So when their divorce was finalized for the second time, it left him with such a bitterness within himself that he never dated another Black woman after my mama. He developed this sense of disdain for Black women that I have spent my adolescence and young adult womanhood challenging him about, right? So I'm giving you all of these details to just provide the context for what I'm getting ready to get into. So my dad, so bitter about the divorce between he and my mother, because she was this idea of this idea of beauty. This, how society conditions us to go after a certain type of person. They have to be, they got to look a certain way and all these kinds of things. I believe that is absolutely why he chose my mama, because ain't no other reason to explain why a holy rolling Bible thumping Christian from Mississippi would go and marry a city slicking pimp from the low end of Chicago. There's no other reason to explain it other than the fact that he was stricken by her beauty. It was wrapped up in this idea of colorism and the idea of what a beauty and perfection was. And that's what he wanted. And he didn't care about nothing else in between. And he thought he was going to be able to change her and bring this idea of family into fruition. Well, on my mama end, she came from such a traumatic background that my dad looked like a good option. What she compared to what she had been dealing with. My mom and dad are both Gen Xers, and the ideology and the philosophy within that culture. When I studied and study the beliefs and all of those things, the different Gen Xers, I noticed something. It hardwired the men in such a way where they can't shake it. They can't shake the patriarchy. They can't shake the desire for supremacy. They can't shake the sense of obligation to control. And they embedded in whatever perception and belief works for them, whether it be Christianity, whether it be another form of organized religion, whether they be a hotel or whatever. The same ideology was always wrapped up in some form of spirituality, in which they were woman beaters, they were controlling, they were manipulative, and they were unfaithful. Now, let me stop and say, my mama, I told y'all, she was a city slicker and a pimp from the low end of Chicago. And she was beautiful. So I'm not going to sit up here and say that my mama was this angel. No, she was not. Okay? I've told y'all stories about my mama. But things came to a head, right? They came to a head for me this past week, in which we were having a conversation, and he began to criticize my mother's parenting. And anybody who knows me knows the quickest way to get cussed TF out is to talk about my mama. Don't talk about my mama. And she's gone now. Oh, you about to get it. And so that is what happened. And so he made some comments about my mother's parenting and the position that it left us in as her daughters, and did so without considering what was about to come at him. So I let loose. And everything that I had bottled up inside of me about him not being there and the opportunities that he has now while he's still on this earth to make sure that we're okay. And he don't take advantage of those opportunities, but he'll sit up and have his and open his mouth and talk about my mom, who regardless of her flaws, produced two very productive women. Right? Y'all know my credentials. You know my pedigree. I don't have to speak on that, right? Angie produced that. Yet you, as my father, decided to criticize that, right? Now, mind you, regardless of her flaws, regardless of her heavy-handed and toxic parenting style in a lot of different ways, she got the job done when it was all said and done. And she never left our side. In fact, she moved across the country on multiple occasions when she felt like we were in the throes of something that we wouldn't be able to come up out of without her guidance. She sacrificed her stability in that way. And she didn't resist. She didn't resist the fact that as adults, we wasn't going to always make the decisions that she wanted us to make. But she remained patient and faithful that what she had instilled in us would get us through. And that is why I can sit before you today and talk about these things and reflect on these things and not be in such distress about no longer having her here, because she prepared us to be able to navigate this world long after she is gone. She instilled the values of legacy in us. She showed us how to be fighters. She showed us how to fight with our words, and she showed us how to fight with our hands. She showed us how to fight with our minds. That's not to say that she was perfect and she didn't leave scars in the process, but she was there and she did the work. And not only did she do the work, when things came full circle and she had to sit up face to face and listen to her daughters, bone of her bone, flesh of her flesh, look her in the eyes and tell her, you did not do a good job in a lot of areas. You caused a lot of pain. And this. She took those blows. She took those blows. She might have threw a couple back. She might, as a matter of fact, she threw a lot back. But when it was all said and done, she took it into reflection, right? And she didn't resist. Instead, she remembered all the things she didn't want to forget, right? And she forgot all the things she didn't want to remember. And she began to manifest a new reality. And she kept working with us on the concept of legacy. She kept working with us on how to navigate difficult relationships, all while trying to make sure that she left behind a legacy for us. And my father didn't like the fact that I stood up for her in that way. And so when I spoke the truth to him about the ways that he has failed as our father, he didn't take it as well as my mom did. As a matter of fact, he became very argumentative and controlling and judgmental and said some very hurtful things to me that made me decide that I just don't need him in my life anymore. Right? But I came to the conclusion this past weekend. I was really grappling and asking God, like, God, why? Why is he like this? Why is he so unwilling to be supportive? Why is he so resistant to hearing what I have to say? And the message came to me that, the truth hurts. I am the realization that he's not needed. That my mom was able to get the job done without him. And in his mind, when they divorced, he had created this image of my mom and wrapped up in this trash bag in which she could be all the worst thing, all of the things. I couldn't begin to tell you some of the words my father has used to describe my mother in the past out of hurt. And he needed that to be the truth, and he needed that to be the reality, because why else? What else could be? What else could it be? Ain't no way in the world that old city rat was smart enough to raise a child, 2 children that were able to take care of themselves, to think for themselves, and not need him. He's mad because I don't need him the way he want me to need him. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't need him at all whatsoever. That would be a foolish thing to say. But I need him in ways that he's just not willing to show up. Right? And I have to be okay with the fact that in this lifetime, the man who sired me is never going to be what I need him to be. Well, let me say this, what I want him to be. He's exactly what I needed him to be, because all things work together. Right? All things work together for our good. So every feeling of abandonment, every feeling of rejection, every feeling of invalidation that I've ever felt in trying to salvage the relationship between my father and I, has to lay itself to rest without ever knowing what it's like to have him as a provider and a protector. Because I don't need him the way he wants me to need him. And so he don't like me. And he don't like to hear what comes out of my mouth. And he don't like the fact that I'm so outspoken and well thought out. And I think I know everything. I know I come off as a know-it-all. And it just rubbed people the wrong way, I know. But I mean, it is what it is. It is what it is. But I wanted to come on here to talk about the role that delusion plays in that. So delusion can be a tool of manifestation, or it can be a tool of avoidance and resistance. And when I think about the ways in which both my mom and my dad used the tool of delusion, I've come to some pretty significant realizations. My mom used the tool of delusion to create the life, to manifest the life that she wanted, to manifest the legacy that was in her loins. And in order for her to be able to do that, she first had to come to terms with the reality that hurt, come to terms with the truth that she did not want to accept, right? And once she came to terms with that, made her peace with that, she could then forget that, i.e., release that from her energy and focus on what was more important, and focus on the good intentions for her children's children, and focus on manifesting for us what she did not have on so many levels. Whereas when I think about the delusion that my father operates in, it's all based around avoiding the uncomfortable truth, avoiding the reality that hurts. And that's why time mocks him. So that's pretty much what I have to share, right? We talked about delusion, and we talked about the law of resistance. The role that law of resistance plays in all of this is the fact that my mama didn't resist what was true. She just faced it. But my dad had spent a lifetime resisting the reality that he doesn't want to face. And he has spent a lifetime trying to convince everyone around him to perpetuate the delusion that he lives in. And I can't do it. I can't do it. I won't do it. And for that reason, I have to suffer not having a father. It makes me think about this video where they was talking about Gen Xers and millennials, and how Gen X had to deal with a certain level of like trauma and the way that they were raised, and they went out and tried to do and manifest certain things, and they were not able to do those things. And to sit up and watch millennials get those things done, it makes them jealous. It triggers them on a certain level. And I've seen that in both my mom and my dad. But here again, the way that they dealt with it was very different. Very different. My mama was honest about those things. We had a lot of conversations about that. My dad, I could tell you the stories, but we ain't got no time for all of that this evening. But yeah, delusion can be a very powerful tool of manifestation. There have been countless stories that I'm sure that you have come across in your lifetime that talk about how people just decided to release concern about what they could not control and focus on what they could control and create an idea in their mind of what truly mattered to them and what they truly desired, and they held on to that dream to get them through some very hard times. They held on to their dream to motivate them to keep going. That is the power of delusion, or if you want to call it imagination, you can call it that as well. But it's a line, right? There's a balance in it all. If you're using the power of your imagination to avoid the truth, you out of balance, baby. And you landing squarely on the extreme end of delusion and significant mental health issues. Especially when you expect other people around you to participate in their delusion, and you want to tear them down and claw them down and cause hurt and hit below the belt when they don't want to participate in that. That's a demon, baby. That's a spirit. It's a spirit. But if you can find the guts and the grit to face your darkness in all its honesty and truth, and transform and transmute that thing into something beautiful. Take the pain that you experience and turn it into a powerful manifestation of legacy and transformation and evolution that not only heals you, but heals everyone after you and everyone before you on a cellular level. Then you're an alchemist. You're a god, a goddess. I was real nervous about sharing this today because I didn't know, I wasn't confident if it was going to come together. And I felt the type of way, I felt a little nervous about being so honest about what I've experienced with my parents. But there it is. Delusion is a very powerful tool. But be careful of the law of resistance and the role that it plays within that. Do not use delusion to avoid your truth. Do not use delusion to gaslight people around you who don't want to participate in it or perpetuate it. Use it as a tool to imagine the wildest dream you could ever possibly imagine. Allow yourself to dive into the revelry and the euphoria of what it would feel like to live that out. And then once you call that thing to you and start coming in, surrender to what the divine is telling you must do in order to manifest what is in heaven on earth. To bring down from the 5D what is in the 5D down here to the third dimension. That's how you use the power of delusion. That's how you break generational curses. Find your balance, baby. Find your balance. All right, this has been a very long overdue segment in Petals of Wisdom. I am yours truly, Zaya the Lotus. The manifestation of peace and blessings earned with every lesson learned. And I was created to birth and rear a new nation of leaders, thinkers, strivers, and survivors. And when I call upon my higher power, my obstacles dissipate effortlessly, clearing the way for all those who have been commissioned for me to serve and to heal on this transcendence journey, to beseech me and allow the transcendence to begin. I thank you so much for taking the time out to interact, to listen, to share, like, subscribe, wherever you're coming from. And if you feel like this message could really help somebody out, do me a favor. Hit the like button wherever you are. Tell me how this resonates in the comments. And come find us in the Kepler Collective on Facebook. All right, y'all. I love you to life. And I look forward to taking this journey with you. Peace.